Hello, beautiful light-filled souls. My name is Trisha Barker, and I'm here with Tara Rose to talk about healing and near-death experiences and all kind of life experiences, and just a few days before Valentine's Day. So I would like to begin with having you, Tara, just tell me what is significant about Valentine's for you, and then maybe we'll get into your near-death experience.
All right. Um, so, um, yeah, Valentine's Day for me, it definitely isn't about the hearts and the candies and stuff like that. And I'm not I'm not prepared really, but still, but but it has a lot of significance for me in terms of the love that we're here on earth to experience and to feel and to receive as well, while we're in our human form. Um, there are multiple ties to Valentine's Day for me that are really important that don't have really anything to do with romantic love. One of them, a near death experience, another, a dream that was like a mimic of a near death experience that was also just as profound, if not more so in certain ways. And the other is that I came in, connected to the other side, which is another story. Like for me, as you're already aware, my journey has been one of the reluctant mystic. But my grandmother died on my dad's side, died when I was fairly young. She passed away, like she was very well loved in her life, but she never knew how to receive that love.
Hmm.
Um, I'll still probably get emotional talking about this. And she passed away on Valentine's Day holding a bunch of unopened Valentines in her hand.
Wow.
Uh, and it was very much a symbol for how she lived her life and how she did not know how to let this love in.
Hmm.
And um, I share a lot in common with her. I mean, she passed away when I was very, very little. I did not know her well. When I was 12, I started feeling her presence around me. When I turned 13, and I didn't talk with my dad about this, he's a psychiatrist, and I was terrified of what he would think of a lot of the experiences that I had. But when I turned 13, he gave me a ring of hers that he had saved, and this book that he had written about her and about how much like her I was.
Oh.
And it was very interesting that it was, I don't know, somewhere between 6 months and a year on from when I started feeling her presence very clearly around me. Um,
Interesting.
and so for me, Valentine's Day is about this greater experience of love that we're here to have. That
And
does encompass love with romantic love with another, but it's so much greater about being the love that we
yeah,
are.
and I think as a near-death experiencer, you know and you've touched the love that is just so natural and our natural state of being on the other
Yeah.
side. But you bring up an interesting point about your grandmother not being open to receiving that love. And I'm very clear, that I came back to give love to my students, to just be this vessel of love. But yeah, sometimes receiving love is hard. I mean, that is in other ways like more challenging.
Yes. Yes. I think that in both experiences that I had, the near death experience and then the dream that was like a near death experience, part of the extraordinary pain that I felt when I realized I still wanted to be in the body was that I was how little I knew about being able to receive. And I think that is a big, I'm going to get emotional again, but I think it is so much of what we're here to know. And human beings giving and receiving, they are like this. And if we're blocked in receiving, we're somehow also, it is a two-way street. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I wonder, that's interesting. Like just as you said that, I wonder if that's why sometimes people who give a lot sometimes attract narcissists because they're not open to receiving love and they just give and give and give. It's might be,
It's often the same, like two sides of the same coin.
yeah, interesting. So I would like to hear you describe your near-death experience though, and this was like the day before Valentine's Day, was it?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you were how old?
18.
Wow.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind just jumping into that experience.
And I'm just chuckling because like you know it, and it's like I'm just awkward. Um,
Well, actually, I didn't know your age, actually, then. So I know we had technical difficulties. It's funny. This happens with near-death experiencers. I'm just like I'm accustomed to the fact that we're gonna have to film twice.
I I fry technology all the time. Like anyone who follows my YouTube videos, like and has done so regularly, or has gotten a recorded reading from me, knows it's like, hey, sorry, camera froze again. Hey, sorry, camera froze again. Like I was also born under Mercury retrograde, and I think it's just like I don't know. My energy fries technology, and if there are two of us, it's like
Oh, I know, and it's so much fun to talk to someone else who's a near-death experiencer and into healing work and all this, but I'm gonna have to get better technology. Like
right.
someone else is gonna have to do this for me. But anyway, I'll try to
Yeah.
calm everything down and let you tell your story.
Um, yeah, so I was 18, like I mentioned. I mean, I was a reluctant mystic, so I it was a strange thing for me because I understood that there was the other side, and I had had experiences from a very young age that were what you might call multidimensional. But that was a very challenging time in my life. Like I had had to leave school when I was quite young because I was very ill. Then I moved out on my own when I was very young. Had a lot of anger, a lot of bitterness, and um, but I was one of the saving graces in my life was dance, and I'd gotten into that when I was 15, and when I was 17, I started studying belly dance. And so that night, the night before Valentine's Day, I'd been at the dance studio at the community college for several hours. I'd been there for a class, and then a buddy of mine who did belly dance also stayed with me, and we danced for several hours. And I always say that dance is like what allowed me to be able to re-enter my body. Like if I said if I had come from like math class or something, it would have just been like instant broken neck or something like that. Um, but we'd been there for several hours dancing really hard, and um, it was evening, like dusk, almost dark and rainy, and I was coming down to this really blind intersection that now, because there have been so many accidents, there are lights and things, but um, I I thought it was clear, and so I moved out into the intersection, and it was like, in an instant there was this Dodge Durango that was just speeding towards me, and I was in a tiny little Mazda Dodge Durango. Um, and the last thing I remember being in my body, because there was like this gap of time when I wasn't in my body, the last thing I remember was seeing these headlights coming. And then, as you're aware, and we've talked about a little bit before, it's like everything, time is irrelevant. It doesn't have the same, it's not the same as it, or we think it is here.
Did you see your body, or were you just immediately somewhere else?
um, I was immediately, I was immediately like ejected. I was out. Yeah. Um, I did a little while later, I did see the scene from above, but like basically the next thing I knew was I was up um, with a whole band of beings, and one guide in particular that I recognized, um, and actually I think my grandmother was there, and there were a lot of beings there. And I remember it was this. Um, I'm just noticing I still have soot on my hands. Sorry. Um, this moment of choice, and yeah, I don't really know how to put words to it still, but it was that, do you want to stay, or this is an opportunity to leave? Um, and there's kind of an element of life review, or there was for me, but not, it wasn't about direct specific experiences, but more of the feeling of my life, and the feeling, like, also being shown the feeling that I wanted to have in life, of this
Um,
experience of love.
so you reviewed it and you didn't see the kind of love coming through that you wanted to experience.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And there was just this profound feeling of, I don't want to go. I want to be able to feel this and live, and still have my life. Um, Back in the body is another challenge, but and then it was sort of almost all wrapped up in one. Like, I could sense that I was still connected, like as one is when they astral travel, via this sort of cord back down to the car. And I was shown the scene from above, but in a weird, like, there were these huge beings of light wrapping themselves around the car. And now that I think about it, Trisha, I hadn't actually really thought about this before, and because it's so long ago, like, I don't replay this in my head a lot.
Right.
Um, I almost feel like it was in that moment of me choosing that those beings wrap themselves around the car. I had never really made that connection, because I think, when people towed away my car, they thought no one survived.
Interesting. So I wonder if they were sending you healing energy the way I saw angels send me healing energy. They very well could have been doing that.
And also, I think just protecting, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
Interesting.
yeah, and so then, then all of a sudden, like, the next thing that I remember being in the body was like, the door being, like, pulled off of my car so that they could put me in the ambulance. Obviously, there was a whole span of time in there, how and when the ambulance got there and all of that. I have no idea.
I want to go back to your experience because I do want you to talk a little bit more about the love. Did you feel it from these beings, or did you just feel love in general when you were outside of form?
I felt, I felt from these beings, yes, and, like, through that, because, you know, as we've talked about before, we are energy incarnate. We are this source energy incarnate that is love, and expresses in different ways. Um, and in that plane, there is no separation, and there is no resistance to that love. So we can be shown what it's like very clearly. Um,
Yeah, and that clarity for me was so amazing. I mean, I know I understand when people want to come back, because they want to experience more, but to me, it was just so beautiful and in such contrast from anything I'd experienced. I kind of didn't want to come back. I saw just how amazing it was, and maybe I got farther, down that tunnel of time where I was more and more disconnected from this life. But what did you feel any sorrow returning to this earth and being away from that love, or did you feel like it was going to be easy to express that love once you came back to form?
That's a good question, and I don't have a direct answer to that because, and I think these experiences are so different for different people, also depending on our personal soul's journey and like
Yeah.
what we're here to learn, what resistance we're here to let go of, and all of that. Because I felt there this longing to experience this love through my life, through my form, but then suddenly being thrust into this reality and still the best I can liken it to is like still in the matrix, like being like suddenly back in the matrix.
Yeah.
And with all of my past trauma and all of this, it's like it didn't um it's an odd thing because I already had some like mystical experiences where and I was resistant to them. So in certain ways it was like even though I wanted that love, I was even resistant to the near death experience.
Yeah, yeah. No, I understand. That is interesting. Like I say that I was agnostic, but my early teens and childhood, I did have a lot of amazing mystical experiences, and especially, it sounds weird, but my 11th grade year of high school, I felt the presence of Walt Whitman. We studied him, and I just felt him come through the grass and fill my body, and I was like, he's still here! I was so excited, to feel that moment with Whitman. And so, but I just thought that I had a vivid imagination, as a poet or as a writer. It was like, oh, whatever, and kind of brushed it aside. But the near-death experience, I wasn't resistant to. But that's interesting that you were like, no.
It wasn't like a conscious resistance. It was more like how like I didn't know how to like it took me a long time and many, many other experiences to integrate more and more of that near death experience into my life in a sense. Like for me, I feel like it was just one more stepping stone on my path as a mystic in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Uh,
Makes sense.
and how do I
And you
put
were so young too. I mean, you were 18, and not that 21 or 22 is that much older, but there is some life in between that. And
Yeah, there was definitely a big difference for me in terms of, I mean, I was always very mature for my age. Like people thought I was 21 when I was 13. But there was still a big difference for me between 18 and 21.
yeah.
Huge difference. And I was more surrendered to that love by age 21. But it's a journey. Um, and I think, I don't know, that like being able to it is a challenge for us human beings to be able to take that divine love that we are, because that's what we're here to do, and integrate it into the matrix. Or in a sense, I feel like what I've done in my life, if we're going to keep up with the matrix parallel, is like I stepped out of the matrix a couple of years ago is how I feel.
Oh, in what way? That's interesting. So this is 2015 when you stepped into being a healer.
2015, 2016, it's like I I went into a very different realm of being, and I lined up with myself. Like and it was years and years of letting go of lots of different conditioning on me, and that's all that we all have. Like we come in here and we have all this conditioning, and we have the stuff that we bring forth from past lives and all of that. And just as an aside, I don't think it's necessary to know about our past lives because we embed all the lessons in this life and in our family dynamics and all of that. But it's still, whatever you want to call it, we bring it forward.
It's still interesting, I think, on
Yeah.
some level. We can clear it in this moment, certainly, and it can reverberate, I think, through time. But yeah, so back to that near-death experience, though. You were back in the hospital. So were you in the hospital on Valentine's Day?
That night, I'm not sure when we got home,
Mm.
because I didn't stay the entire night. Um, you know,
Head injuries and
yeah, they did all the MRI, and they did all of, stitched me up in a bunch of different places because I had lots of cuts from the glass. And like I said, I feel like the fact that I'd been dancing for several hours allowed my body to be like a rag doll. But 17 staples here, I still have a huge scar. Um, and I don't know, to this day, I still don't know like how my boyfriend got the message that I was in the hospital, or how to, like it was, I don't remember. But he did come and he brought me home. And yeah, as I said to you before, like the Valentine's morning, he was shaving my head like that. Definitely not your typical Valentine's Day.
but you're like, I'm alive. I'm here. So I want to skip forward since I do know some about your story. How did 2008 and that dream just help you integrate the near death experience and some of those lessons of your life on a deeper level?
I think I had to have a lot of reminders along the way. And so, I had this dream that was also the night before Valentine's Day, um, that was so real, like a near death experience, And when in that dream, I've talked to you about it already, but it was so. I mean, it's graphic, but my throat was slit, and I could feel in the dream, I could feel the warmth of my blood like flowing down, and I could feel the whole transition out of my body. And I had a very similar kind of moment, but in some ways even more intense. It was because it was even more lucid, where I had this moment of gratitude for my life and the life that I had lived. And then it was this rush of feeling that I can't explain, being shown just how much love we're here to experience, that we're here to allow to flow through us. And like we were saying at the outset, not just to give, but to have as an exchange with life. And that um, it is an indescribable thing. But so that like came over me so intensely. And also the understanding that this is meant to encompass love with another person, as part of it, but not the whole shebang, obviously. I felt this tremendous sadness, like a tremendous almost remorse for not being able to feel that in this life. And it was so real, how dreams can sometimes be that way. It was, I don't know, a gift from spirit or whatever you want to say. And then in that tremendous sadness of, I missed out, I woke up. And I realized, oh, I still have this chance. I still have this opportunity.
So, how would you tell other people to be more receptive to experiencing more love and being in more connection with their divine flow of love?
Well, something that I talk and that you are aware of too, that's actually where I start with anybody, is how well are you listening to yourself? Because for me, it all really does start with how much are we doing anything because it's what we think we should do, and how much are we just listening to who we really are in any given moment. And that is a journey. But it's like the ability to listen to yourself, and continue to follow that still brings like lesson upon lesson upon lesson beyond that, you know. But um, for me, listening to self is that's listening to God. That's where we also open up the capability to really listen to spirit and, you know, bridge the dimensions and all of that, because it's connected to us, you know. Um,
Interesting. Yes, yes. This is a slightly different topic, and this is where we're cut off. And I want to come back to it because it's so important, and I've talked about it in other videos. And I didn't say this when we were talking before, but I've recently been going through a healing, a physical healing that I thought was pretty impossible. I have this lineage of women in my family who had thyroid issues, and so of course I developed a thyroid issue at some point. And then as I kind of distanced myself from those family ties and said, no, I'm a totally different person. I thought the thyroid was getting worse. I had all these symptoms, but it turns out the medication has to be really lowered, and these nodules have kind of gone away. They can't find them on the scan, and the endocrinologist was like, that's weird. I don't know where they went. And so the thyroid is actually healing. And it's been a focus of, internal work, but it's also been some diet and some herbs and, other things. But I know you have some pretty profound experiences with healing, so I would like to hear more about that.
yeah, it's funny because it came up and it came up the other day. Like I was saying to you, this particular part of my healing, my own personal healing, I hadn't thought about a lot in a while. Because I feel like I've lived like multiple lives in one, you know what I mean?
Yes.
But I don't know whether to start at the end and go back or start at the beginning. Sorry, I'm
Let's
just
start at the end and go back. I think that'll be interesting. So
okay.
what did you heal in particular that a lot of people want to know about?
So I I healed from polycystic ovarian syndrome, and I had been diagnosed with it when I was like 15 or 16 and put on birth control pills. And that's how the medical establishment deals. It's like, well, let's just put a band-aid on it, basically. And it's a systemic thing, and it can make you more prone to diabetes, and you know, acne, and just all kinds of intense things. Uh, and I'm still struggling with how to share this this story, but um, I was thinking about it yesterday. Like I told you, I was thinking about it yesterday because um, I've been, and I still think it's kind of funny to talk about these sorts of things because they're still kind of taboo
Yeah.
for some people. But I also think that it's really important to talk about it, and I think that it's important that we have a society where it's not taboo, but it's beautiful because it is beautiful. Um, but I track my cycle, and I had thought that my cycle had gone off because when I healed by all intents and purposes from PCOS in 2012, I went off of the birth control pills and synced up with the moon, and bled from then on out with the moon, sometimes switching to be with the new moon, mostly bleeding on the full moon. And then my cycle started doing something odd last year. Last year was really crucial for me. It's when I went and lived by myself in the redwoods. I really, really devoted my life to the healing work that I'm doing for others now and all of that. But I noticed my cycle was doing something different, and it wasn't bleeding with the moon the way I often did. And I at first I thought something was wrong, and I just started tracking it. I wouldn't necessarily track it before because I could tell when I was ovulating. I could tell when I was bleeding, and it was with the moon. Like there wasn't really a need. But I was like, what's going on? And I started to realize that I was bleeding with the when the moon is in Sagittarius, and the moon has a quick cycle through the astrological signs. Um, so yeah, I realized I was bleeding with the like astrological
And you're a Sagittarius.
Sagittarius, and then
So
ovulating with Aries when the moon is in Aries. And so anyway, I'm rather fascinated by this, and like posted a on an astrological like group and Facebook, and it's something that I don't know. There were like two or three other women who'd had a similar experience, but otherwise people were like, "Wow," you know.
interesting. Yeah, no, when I understand, like when we're so cut off from nature, like if there was moon cycles where I don't go outside and look at the moon, then I might be a few days off. But if I go out and I'm out in nature and I literally spend time just looking up at the moon and soaking it in, then I just sync back up with the moon. Now, it yeah, it maybe it's taboo and maybe it doesn't mean something to some people who are listening, but I think we're all in touch with nature, and if it's not, the cycle, then it's something else for someone else. There's this clearing and this just this connection that we are made much more whole when we're in nature and much more at peace. And so I think that's important.
We are that. We are of the stars and we are of the earth, you know?
Yes,
Um,
that was one of the messages from my near-death experience was remind them to go to nature. So we're doing that right now. Like,
yeah,
whether you're male, female, whatever age you are, like nature is important. It's just part of our healing.
yes. And it's funny. I mean, I want to get back to the PCOS thing
Yeah,
in a
yeah.
I have one thing to say about that if we remember, that's a really important thing to touch on because a lot of my life I live very close to nature. I often live places where I could just go out on a hiking trail. I didn't even have to get into a car. Um,
Nice.
And I would live, though, places where I was within range of a city because I do enjoy the things that go on in cities. And for my master's, I moved to Seattle, and that was really the first time I lived in a city. But it's a very quiet city. And so it didn't, and I lived in a pretty like quiet neighborhood. There were still lots of parks. That's one of the things that I love about Seattle. It has many, many parks. So I could still actually like run down to the water, um, you know. Uh, but being in Seattle, I got even more used to having certain things that you have in the city. There was a wonderful dance scene there and all this stuff. Um, but I didn't realize I had some other health issues. I didn't realize I had a really big issue with vitamin D at the time, and so I was getting sick a lot. And I like fled Seattle for California and went to the Bay Area. And it was when I was in the Bay Area that I really awakened to doing healing work, mystical work as my vocation, you know what I mean, as my calling.
And did you open to that easily? I think we talked about how there was some reluctance. So
Oh,
could you
yeah,
describe some of that?
that was a hard journey, and we can come back to that too. But I want to say it was it was a struggle for me because I didn't know I didn't want to admit to myself just how much of me still longed to be closer to nature. Like I would still go on lots of hikes and stuff like that. Um, and the housing situation in the Bay Area is horrible. So
Oh,
I would be going from sublet to sublet to sublet, and it was really challenging. And when a particular sublet was coming to an end, like the landlord decided that he needed to move back into the house, I was like, well, I'm working for myself now. I am going back to nature. And I moved to the redwoods, and it was such a relief. And it was just to say that, like, to go back to what you were saying, we need it so much more than often we realize. And I mean, I always knew that I needed nature, but I was like that's the thing that us humans often do, and what I have done for myself and try to help others do is, let go of what we think we should be doing or what we think is going to make us happy, to go for what is really calling from within, even if it seems like, well, how's that possible? Or how's that going to work? Or what if I miss out on these social things? Or what. And,
Yeah.
but like Spirit said to me years ago, when you honor, it's so beautiful, it still like makes me emotional. When you honor yourself, you honor all of creation.
Hmm.
And so for me, moving back to nature was part of doing that.
That is beautiful. That really touches me in a deep area because, yeah, the fears that we have about coming out and, coming out as a medium or coming out, as a mystic or, just calling ourselves these things in a society that, well, for me, this is back in 1995, it was unheard of, in my conservative family to say, hey, I'm having these psychic flashes, or,
Yeah.
hey, I'm able to channel, or, these are things that were just shocking to my family. And so I just kind of kept them under wraps. And you want to be accepted by people. And then, then too, it was in my early 20s and I wanted to date, like I didn't want to come like, hey, I'm a psychic. That would certainly run off some people. And, so there was this,
Yeah.
yeah, so on so many different levels, I was like just denying who I was. And then, of course, as an academic, I continued to use that other side to help my students and especially, students who are hurting. But I didn't want to come out and blog openly probably until 2016. So I understand that impetus to fit into society, but it's not as fun. It's really not. It's way more exciting to just be who you are.
Yes. And it's often hard for us to make that leap, but when we do, it's such a relief. Such a relief.
Yeah.
And but the other thing is like sometimes people feel like, I feel like I have a purpose, and this was me too for a really long time. Like I feel like I'm here to do this thing or be this thing, and the truth is we don't have to be or do anything in particular. It comes back to that as well, just listening well to yourself every day, and that sometimes we have to make pretty big leaps that are scary. Um, but when we listen well, we are able to know what those are. And even if it takes us a couple tries, you know, we can keep listening, we can keep feeling that call, and we come more and more into alignment with who we are. And that brings peace, real peace.
So how has it been for you since 2015, making that switch into being way more in the flow and more in alignment with who you really are? How's the experience?
The beginning was hard as fuck.
And yes, we cuss on this channel. That's fine. Yeah, because it is sometimes.
The beginning was not, like I think I shared with you before, like I actually had some of my most dark moments ever in my entire life. And that's actually saying a lot because I went through some really challenging things starting from a very young age and all the illness and stuff like that. Some of my darkest moments were just before I put out the YouTube video that got 9,000 views and totally changed how, like I already had a mailing list. I was already working with some clients, but like that totally changed things. I mean, when we choose, this is something that I talk with clients a lot about too. When we choose ourselves, it's not always sunshine and roses, because then we're also choosing to see everything, and that takes time as well. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was going to say something, and I wonder if this is the case for you too. But as a woman, when you're choosing yourself, and this is something that I struggle with, I know that there have been other lifetimes where I haven't chosen myself, and maybe I didn't even have the financial capacity to do that or the society that would accept me, in the sense of expressing myself. But it is it is terrifying. I mean, there's so much that you have to walk through. And then when you're leaving a more traditional realm, that, there's the box that you fit into, then you're just up against the world in a new way, and it is just a totally different experience. And I'm not fully in there. I'm part time with all this, so I would like to hear your experience of how that was.
Um, I don't even know where to start. One thing I do want to say is I think being quote unquote part time is good, um, up into a certain point, but it does, because like the first time, I think I was talking to you before about like, when I first really came out of the closet and I put up my website and I was really doing mediumship for people, but I was finishing my master's degree, and that moment where I was really terrified to try and make it work financially. Um, I'm really glad that I also didn't try to force it then. And it's a very, kind of back to that other thing that I said, like, it doesn't matter what we're doing. One could be a trucker and be in their enlightenment and minister to those at the truck stops. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But it's about how we're in alignment with who we are. But for me, I also had this, I didn't ever want to force it. I wanted that, like, it was terrifying for me. And so it was important to face the fear and keep moving forward. But I also didn't ever want to force it or be coming from ego, or in some ways that held me back. I was in certain ways very naive and innocent when I went into this. I didn't realize how many people would look at me as competition when I started shining. And I remember years ago, um, someone sharing with me, like, don't let other people's jealousy of you get in your way. And it was like I didn't even realize until a year into doing it just how much I actually that had happened, and I'd allowed it, and I hadn't even seen it because I was facing so many of my internal fears to even be out there doing what I was doing. So the thought of like competing with another person was like not even what, like that someone would be jealous that I was doing, because it was so hard for me. I was having so many challenges internally. I couldn't imagine that someone would be jealous of
Yeah.
whatever attention that I was getting. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and part of the spiritual journey for me is coming out of isolation and into community. And so the whole jealousy thing is kind of like, it just blows by me because I'm like, wow, I just expected this. And it has largely been too. I mean, like there are those weird moments, but community is so important because then I don't feel alone in this. I mean, the people who have reached out to me and shared their journey and talked about things that they have done and how they've opened up, I'm so grateful to them. Like they are the ones, the mentors that mean so much. But yeah, there are people who look at this as a business or a competition, and
Yeah.
it's America. you know?
Yeah, and that's, I think I always, and I still, it makes things quote unquote hard for me at times in certain ways, but it always has to come from the heart for me. And I can feel if and when it isn't, and that doesn't feel good. And but anyway, I mean that strayed from the topic a little bit, but um, it was about just being able to continue to move forward and to kind of like I alluded to before, when we listen to ourselves, we're still, that leads us then to the next lesson and the next lesson and the next lesson. And so for me, there was a lot in there about really, um, then having faith and saying, okay, I'm being called to do this. And I'm being called not to try and manipulate this. Like I could have, I was one of the earlier people on YouTube who was talking about things like twin flames and stuff like that. And I could have like really capitalized on that in a different kind of business way. But I was called to learn about my faith, and my faith in just continuing in my own healing and letting it be an organic exploration. Um,
And I would like you to speak a little bit more about twin flames and soulmates because I'm one of these people, even though I'm on the spiritual journey, I've been really sarcastic about it, and I kind
I
of
think we
believe
had
that
initial,
yes,
yes.
yes. So I I think that there are people who mirror us, and yes, we feel the passion and connection and whatever, and then there are people who are compatible with us and are more like, soulmates, because they can be with us for the long haul, but I'd like to get rid of some of my cynicism around the whole thing because anytime I see people talking about it, I'm just like, oh, whatever. Like I am connected to the light and I'm going to have a soul connection with the people I'm going to have soul connections with, and that's that. But
Yeah.
yeah, everyone has different theories on that. What is your
Well, I
theory?
mean, for me, it wasn't like this was this was something I feel like I basically planned to have this experience in my life. It was funny because, this is a much bigger conversation, but and I'm trying to feel just how to go about it because I, like you, I have a totally cynical part of me. I have a part of me that hardly even believes in love of the romantic sort. Um, because I've just seen so much screwed up stuff. You know what I mean? Um, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, but I'm probably going to get unexpectedly emotional about this. Um, and I don't talk about my personal experiences a lot publicly because I'm a very private person, and that's been a strange thing for me to be in certain ways in the public eye, but be a very private person. Um, but kind of what happened, and just bear with me for a moment here because it's going to lead into my explanation for the twin flame thing. I don't like that label, and I've pulled away from the label, not because I don't believe in a lot of these experiences. They're very real, and I've worked with hundreds of people now around the globe, and there is something here. Um, but I connected with someone. Um, I there's no way to put it into words, but there was such a an experience of recognition. Um, it's gonna make me emotional. Sorry. And I'm really grateful because it catalyzed, like it, I spent a lot of my life running, right? Running from my spirituality, running, like despite having the near death experience, despite all of these things, that cynical part of me, or the part that wanted to just play it safe, fit in the box, you know, was terrified to be seen, um, for reasons I cannot even explain. This person made me stop running. And they're a very clear mirror for who I am, who I was wanting to become, and also, you know, the kind of forced upon me a lot of, not forced upon me because I feel it is a soul plan choice, you know. Uh, so much growth. Some of it not of the easy kind, you know. This person also really triggered me. I wanted to run away from the love that I felt quite often, um, and they did also. um, but it was really interesting. I had gotten quite angry with this person. I'm just going to say this person. Um, And I thought, oh, like any other connection in my life, I can just let this go. I've felt soul connections with people and some that lingered for years after we had contact and stuff like that. But I pushed him away, and it wasn't like in the interpersonal way he then wouldn't leave me alone. It was like the connection never died and got even more intense.
On a
And
spiritual level.
spiritual level.
Hmm.
And I got pissed about it.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I was
Because
like, no
we want to
way.
control things.
Yeah, I wanted to make it go away. It's so funny to me when people like look for a twin flame or something like that, and I'm like, man, if you're meant to have an experience like this, you're not, you can't make it not happen. You know what I mean? Like, um, and I was mad about it. But so I started looking for explanations for the experiences that I was having, and
So how
that's
long? What kind of time period are we talking about this not going away?
I don't want to maybe right now at least go into that, but this was when this was intensifying, this feeling where I had pushed them away, but then all the like feelings and feeling them and the spiritual connection um, was 2015. And this person had also, at the very beginning of that year, sort of unwittingly catalyzed one of the biggest heart opening experiences I've ever had in my life. And so it was very much not logically aligned, but energetically, spiritually aligned with the opening that I was experiencing in terms of saying, okay, I will open up to my mediumship abilities. I will open up to all of this. So when I was having these experiences and feeling like frustrated and like back and forth between like wanting to have this person in my life and feeling mad about it and feeling all of this energetic stuff, it yeah, it was it was in 2015 in that time period. Um, one of the interesting things that happened, there have been many, many layers to that whole experience, and I don't really want to go into it, but it was very much a part of my soul's plan. And it was interesting because as much as I was resisting that experience, I was also like being forced to make peace with it. Um, People started finding me who were having similar experiences, and I was able to help them. And they um, they were like, you really have a gift and you need to present like more of this information to other people, because there are lots of us having these spiritual kinds of experiences with another person that break the mold of typical relationships, um, but are very much bound to spiritual growth and are often part of a 3D relationship as well.
So did you get information from your guides and from dreams about what's going on too, or?
Yes, yeah. I mean, to a certain degree. I mean, we're given what we need to be able to keep continuing, let's say.
And
Um, but
that's 2015. I mean, do you feel freed? I mean, maybe I'm asking too many personal questions.
I'm
Or
not.
do you...
I don't want to go. I don't want to go into that too
Yeah.
much in terms of the personal connection.
Yeah.
Um, I am no longer feeling that, like, the resistance, or you know what I mean. Um, but but it was interesting because I thought that my quote unquote spiritual work was just going to be in terms of like um, the psychic work that I did, the mediumship, like helping to guide people. I had no idea it would have this component of supporting people with their relationships, and people in all kinds of different relationships, you
Well,
know.
I think anything that we've gone through, then, and we touched on this, but anything that we've walked through, we can help other people. So
Yeah,
immediately I saw that because I suffered child abuse, I was so connected to every student who had suffered abuse in their home, from profound ways to small ways, and just pain, of family dynamics. And then I felt connected to women and men who'd been raped. And then I felt connected to people who'd been divorced. And, like whatever it is that I walked through, I was connected to others. So it makes total sense that anything you experience, you can guide other people and you can help them.
yeah. In that regard, that's very true. But it was still like, even if I didn't want to guide people doing this, that was like I was forced into helping people with this.
Yeah.
And so, because that was the YouTube video that I did that just went crazy, was a tarot reading that centers around this kind of divine love. And so back to like all your feelings about twin flames and all of this, what I discovered working with hundreds of people around the globe, partly, of course, like through the YouTube videos and the comments and the emails that I received, but then hundreds of people that I met with one on one. What I have discovered is that for many at this time on the planet, many are being asked to awaken via this kind of connection with someone else. And a lot of these people are destined or to be together. Um, it, I never emphasize that though, because for me, it is about you are the one. You know what I mean? Like, so it's about helping people to align with themselves as I have done. I know that for me, even if my ego wanted to be in a relationship in 2015, not a good idea. I would only like vaguely be ready around this time in my life. So it's basically what I've seen is happening, and what I see is the value of the whole quote unquote twin flame dynamic is, one, it's awakening people to unconditional love. And there sometimes is no better way to get someone's attention. And back to the near-death experiences and all of that, I mean, there was no better way to get my attention regarding this love that I am here to feel and to be and to eventually experience with another than through another being.
Yeah. So,
So
hmm,
I don't. So yeah, people are. I know you have something to say, but I want to just thought.
yeah.
So people are being really pushed into. There's a lot of talk about unconditional love, but these kinds of connections teach it to you. They teach you the meaning and the experience of unconditional love for self and for another being. Um,
Probably on a deeper level. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there are many, like we've had the conversation before, there are many ways to do this. There are many ways to be shown. Near-death experience is one of them. But for some of us, I feel, and it's like it's not a matter of it being right or wrong. It's just some souls came to have this experience, came to be awakened this way. And so it's not a wrong or a right, it's just some souls have come to have this experience to, and it's not about hanging on to the other person or making them into something that they aren't or anything like that. Um, But what I have seen that it's doing for the people that I work with, and I can see for myself, is it's changing how we're, for a lot of people, how we're looking at relationships. Instead of doing this from the outside in thing, it's from the inside out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense
Yeah.
on some level. It's easy to love pets unconditionally. It's easy to love students unconditionally. It's easy to love the world unconditionally. And it's really easy to put partners in boxes and to go, oh, they hurt me in this way, so I'm going to close this off. And oh, well, this person works because we have all these things in common, so I'll push through and not just love them unconditionally, for the things that they want to do and the way that they want to express themselves. And I think that is like a greater challenge. So when people are able to love unconditionally in a relationship, that's certainly profound. I
Yeah.
guess it's still that label. I mean, does it matter? I mean, like, is it
I
any relationship that you're just able to love unconditionally in, any romantic relationship? I mean, isn't that
I don't.
that running? I think that's what bugged me about twin flame descriptions too, is like, oh, come on, stop running.
Well, yeah, except unless you have this actual experience, then you know why. And not everybody's here to have that experience. From the outside looking in, it's like, what the fuck? Yeah, just stop running. But you're faced with all the parts of yourself that want to run from love. And that was, I guess, what I was shown in that near death experience, like especially that second experience I had, just how resistant us human beings are. And so it isn't this way for everybody, but some of us, maybe it's the most stubborn ones, I don't know. We come and we arrange to have, and sometimes potentially more than one. Like I said, I don't necessarily like the twin flame label, and that's a whole other thing. And to me, all of it is a big mystery, and that
Yeah.
I love that, and I still have the cynical side of myself. But what I can see is that that experience, like no other, has pushed me to my heart again and again and again, further and further and further, in a way that no other experience could. And that has been the truth for so many people that I've connected with around the world.
That I understand, that no matter what situation, if it opens your heart more in this unconditional loving way, then what a beautiful experience. Because that is, I mean, that love on the other side that I experienced during the near death experience, like, I just long for more of it. Like, I can find it in meditation, I can find it in giving to the world, I can find it in, and yes, sometimes in a union, there is that element of unconditional love. But yeah, that's what we all need more of, is more and more and more unconditional love.
Yes. Yeah. Um, so the way that I've seen it and experienced it, working with so many people, is it's just a part of this awakening that's happening on the planet. It's a part of, and it's also a part of coming back. I mean, even back to the PCOS thing, like coming back into harmony. A lot of the things that I have been through, and then also that I experienced with that particular connection, helped me balance my own masculine and feminine and be more safe. Sorry, I feel like I've had something in my eye a lot of this time, also my hair. Um, but to be more safe in being a woman, and in every dimension of that. Not just also, because that's a whole other conversation, is women are not supposed to be powerful, but we are. There are so many dimensions of the goddess or of womanhood, and it's not all pretty. Um, and for me to really embrace all of that and feel safe in that power is a huge, huge thing.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. Like I feel like I came into this world feeling very powerful. And then after my near-death experience, I felt incredibly powerful. I mean, in a naive kind of way, I thought, oh, I'm the next Deepak Chopra, like I'm the next Marianne Williamson. I mean, like in silly ways. I didn't realize that, I had so much to let go of and so much to learn. And then I really didn't realize how painful this world would be to a young woman, in this young woman's journey because I suffered a lot and, I was still facing, things in society that were not pretty.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's made part of me like a warrior, like there's this other part of me that's incredibly angry and strong. And I don't see that as a bad thing. Like
No,
I don't see it as a bad thing at all.
no. I just got chills all up and down. This is something I've been wanting to talk a lot more about. Um, you know, Kali, I don't know if you're familiar with the goddess Kali. She is just as valid a an expression of the divine feminine as, Mother Mary. And Mother Mary is an energy that I'm very connected with, but I grew to really love Kali in the last couple of years. And it was funny, I had an it's part of this tidal shift that we're seeing happening with the Me Too movement and more awareness being raised and all of that, um, because it can't be the way that it was anymore. But it was like even as I was, doing more and more of my spiritual work publicly and all of that, especially early on in that, I was presented with even more, experiences of sexual harassment, and most of us have had those experiences going back pretty far. And I looked like
Yeah.
I was one when I was 13, and so that had some ramifications. But it was interesting because at that time, like the first thing that happened that was really awful, it was in 2000. It was at the end of 2015 or the beginning of 2016. I did the usual thing of like pretend that didn't happen. Just you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I don't know how to deal with this, and like didn't talk to anybody about it, and And then I had another experience where it was actually a healer who really
Mm.
crossed a line with me, and I felt that energy of Kali. I felt that rise up in my being, and I spoke out in that situation. I was met with more what you might call white male patriarchy BS in response. And I was like, but um, but I started really getting, oh, like it's so important to have that side. And actually, that person also taught me a lot about that, and that helped to heal my own relationship with my father. It helped heal my relationship with the masculine and the masculine within myself, so that the more tender
Yeah.
part of myself could just feel safe to be.
Interesting. Yeah, like that's coming full circle. I've realized that the tougher part of myself, like those situations made me access a tougher part of myself or a stronger part of myself. And really even, I don't know if it's past life stuff, but heal some part of me that wanted revenge immediately. Like there was this, like, how could someone cross this boundary and take away my power? I want it righted in some way instead of just realizing, like, okay, I can both forgive, acknowledge this, and then be someone who helps protect the world in some way and speaks out and changes the situation for others, but and reminds people to do the right thing, to speak out in that moment, to start changing things. And even I think I have an energy that teaches young men how to be differently, like especially when I've taught in junior high classrooms and high school classrooms, there's a lot of wonderful men who just from their family upbringings or from their environment, they don't even know that they're crossing boundaries, but when you talk about it, then they start to realize how to be different.
Yes. Yeah. It's so, so, so important. There's so much healing. And that's a lot of the gift that I see in the whole quote unquote twin flame, whatever the heck this, because I get really irritated also with a lot of the twin flame stuff that's out there because I feel like it actually pulls people away from this here because this is what it's really about.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but is also about the healing of the masculine and the feminine on the planet at this time. You know, and it's really
Yeah.
powerful stuff.
It is, and that's a beautiful place to end. I don't know if you want to say anything about your divine masculine and divine feminine readings, but we can end there if you want to say something.
I don't I don't know. I mean, yeah, I do. I still do have the YouTube channel. I am aware for my own work. Um, a lot of where my own personal growth is in my spiritual work is in the mediumship part. I think that we start to become chased by the things that we need more of in our lives. So now I've been having a lot of people contact me who had their person pass away.
Hmm.
Um, so, and I know that for myself, that's a part of my work that I have. Um, it's very intense work, and it's about healing. It's about healing between dimensions, which I think that you understand and have experienced too, doing that work. Um, but anyway, you know, it's I love working with people, supporting. I support people with all kinds of things. Um, and I'm aware that I am always, always growing. Mm.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking with me. This has been beautiful on a couple of days before Valentine's Day, but I wish you the best. And
Thank you.
please
Likewise.
subscribe to my channel if you want to hear more lovely interviews like this one. But thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Trisha.